Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the session, Where's the Remote Control, Regional Project Implementation in Pandemic Times. My name is Julian Montes de Oca. I work for GIZ and the CReW Plus project, implementing integrated water and wastewater solutions for a clean and healthy Caribbean Sea. Next. Now, the framework in which we develop our talk for today is the GEF CReW Plus project, whose main objective is to implement regulatory, financing, and technological actions for integrated water and wastewater management, what we call the IWWM concept, and this is done in the wider Caribbean region. Now, the solutions that we're developing within CReW Plus are aimed at reducing negative impacts of wastewater, and of course, for the environment and people. Now, two of the approaches that we use for this is the consideration of a landscape approach, thus working in the framework of integrated water resource management, WASH, and wastewater reuse. So these are normally or sometimes not properly integrated, but that's how we try to integrate them. Additionally, we want to promote the upscale and replication of these solutions. Next. Now, the GEF CReW Plus project is already in its execution phase, having started in 2020, and it aims to channel $14.9 million from the Global Environmental Facility through its implementation agencies, IDB and United Nations Environment Program. And this is executed through three agencies that include GIZ, the Organization of American States, and the Caribbean Environmental Program of UNEP, and the Secretariat of the Cartagena Convention. Next. Now, this is the geographic scope of our project. As we mentioned, the wider Caribbean area in 18 countries across where we work. And this provides an excellent opportunity for exchange and lessons learned being shared across the region in this what we call a seascape of the greater Caribbean. Next, please. Now, GEF CReW Plus executes activities through four components. First component essentially is working with policy reforms and instruments that provide a framework for adequate integration, water and wastewater management. The second component deals with the financial sustainability, and this is financial mechanisms and tailor-made solutions for finance of these IWWM actions. Thirdly, we also work on piloting and development of infrastructure solutions through design and operation of wastewater facilities, and these are aimed more at the smaller scale, decentralized, local, rural, and peri-urban. And finally, of course, bringing home the point that we have to work in an integrated manner is the sharing of experience that we develop in component 4 through knowledge management and advocacy. And this is also all in the framework of the SDGs, more than just SDG 6, but others that come across, including climate change, health, sustainable cities, etc. Next. So without further ado, to go into our topic for today, I will introduce Rodrigo Riquelme from IDB. Rodrigo is a water and sanitation senior specialist from the Inter-American Development Bank, and he's a very experienced civil engineer with a long history in analysis, development, implementation of operational infrastructure projects in the water sector. Now, Rodrigo will briefly touch upon what are some of the challenges and opportunities that we have faced in the implementation of a project that draws such a wide geographic range. Please go ahead, Rodrigo.
Thanks very much, Julio, and good evening and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with my friends and colleagues from the CReW project. This project, of course, is a very complex project. As you can see, working in the pandemic was a real challenge. 18 countries are participating in this project, are liaising directly either with the IDB, UNEP, GIZ, the Organization of American States. So the complexity is high. And my first reflection is that if we hadn't built up a relationship with all our partners, internal and external partners, before the project was prepared, it would have been impossible to do this project in preparation and execution. This is the result of many years of our internal partners working in those countries, we as the IDB working in those countries, and our relationship with our internal partners, which is why we could prepare and start executing this project the way we are doing it during the pandemic. So my first reflection is that we were very blessed to have this group that knew each other from the beginning and before, and we have all these countries that were IDB countries, the majority of them were for the sector in the past. The other reflection is, as everyone knows, the pandemic lasted for longer than we thought. We were prepared, or we were reflecting about a pandemic period of a couple of months. Everyone was saying, after May or June 2020, this thing's going to be over. So everyone was mentally thinking about going out at that time. We're entering the second year of the pandemic, so we need to cope a lot with frustration and with emotional disappointment. This is something that we need to do day by day within ourselves, within our partners, and try to cope with the disappointment of not progressing the way we want to progress. This includes a lot of lack of traveling. We cannot travel. We can have face-to-face meetings, which is really something that we were expecting to have at the beginning of the preparation of the project. So we need to cope with that, and we need to become very creative in terms of being efficient with our work without seeing each other or without traveling to see the site. We also, in our own institutions, we have some level of overactivity related to the pandemic. The IDB, for instance, changed a lot of their operations to improve the coping with the alleviation of the pandemic. So we have to reprogram many loans in order to have better disbursements, to have more impact in our disbursement, and to have an increase of the employment. So we need to have a lot of good quality time dedicated to this part of our own business, put it that way. Also, our institutions, our counterparts, they have their own challenges. They need to go with the pandemic. They have many priorities in order to see what to do first. And every country in the countries of the CReW, they had different sequences with the pandemic. So the COVID entered later in one country, it started earlier in another. So the way that they approached the project was different because they were destructured, because they had different type of restrictions. So we need to do a lot of that during the execution. We also need to highlight that every one of us had a technological boost in our lives, including work. So we needed to change the way that we manage the projects. Specifically, the IDB turned many other longer processes like procurement to quicker and agile processes. So procurement was much better, was abbreviated. We also included our digital signatures. We have the decision-making process was much better, much efficient. So I think that we made a lot of progress in having this technological boost in terms of mitigating all the bad aspects of the pandemic. So just to finish, I think that the only bad loss, if we think about technology, is not to have our presential face-to-face relationship, and this is what went against the project. So we're looking forward to have again this day-to-day activity when we meet people, when we go to the site, and when we can share in another way with our internal partners and with our external partners from the country. So I think it's going to be positive for everyone. The new approach. We need to communicate things in a different way. We're learning about how to communicate. We always knew that communication was one of the priorities of the project, but now we need to make sure that we have the correct outreach with all tools in order to transmit our own enthusiasm with the project to other counterparts. So that's my reflection, and hopefully we're going to have more progress in the project with all this knowledge that we have accumulated during the pandemic. Thanks.
Thank you, Rodrigo, for this general overview of our the challenges and opportunities that we're facing for implementation. Now we'll go to our panelists that I'll introduce first, and also reminding everyone that you will be able to submit your questions in the chat, and I will transmit them. So to start off, our panelists are Joaquin Viquez, our colleague and technical advisor on the CReW Plus project. He's an agricultural engineer and master's in environmental science and engineering. He's a passionate social entrepreneur with a lot of experience in environmental projects, water and sanitation, and also in biogas technology. Additionally, we also have one of our national partners, Liliana Garcia from Amigos de Ciancan in Mexico. She's an environmental lawyer with more than 20 years of experience working on projects of nature conservation and sustainable development. She's also worked in environmental education and also worked on the government side in Mexico in Semarnat as the National Environmental Agency, among others. Also from the Caribbean, Ignatius Jan joins us. He's the executive director of CAWASA, the Caribbean Water and Sewerage Association. Ignatius is a national of St. Lucia and has been with CAWASA since 2014. He's also on the executive council of the Caribbean Water and Wastewater Association, and with broad experience of over three decades in regional environmental organizations, technical cooperation, and government, focus on the water sector, training, and capacity development. So to start off with Joaquin, I would like to ask you if you can refer a little bit to our experience in the area that you're working, which is the development of and design and construction of innovative wastewater treatment technologies. How has this presented challenges in the different countries and numerous partners and communities that we've worked with? Go ahead, Joaquin.
Thank you very much, Julio. Very happy to be here today. So from GIZ, we've been working as an executing agency, as Julio mentioned, in activities in Costa Rica, Belize, Colombia, Suriname, Honduras, and Dominican Republic. This is under component 3, which Julio mentioned is the execution of wastewater infrastructure. One of the things that we recognize is that these projects, the amount of energy and the amount of impact within, or let's see, we recognize that the required infrastructure in many of these countries is much larger than what the project can actually execute. And in this sense, I think that we find very, very valuable and important to focus not so much on the project itself, maybe a renovation of a treatment plant or a construction on a new system, but what that project means to the country and to the community and how that can scale within the future. So that's one learning we had. I can go about some challenges in my 6 minutes. Basically, one of the things that we found that it's important is to identify what is needed, right? So once you enter the community or the project that you're executing, what is needed? Is it the right fit in the moment? And is it feasible? Is it technical and legally feasible? So those are one of the biggest questions that we've been working on for the past months in order to make sure that the project is successful in the long term. We have valued, or one of the things that we've learned is the value and importance of local knowledge and local partnership. At the end of the day, I'm based in Costa Rica, and as Rodrigo already mentioned, traveling, and as many of you already know, traveling is very limited, and this is not only internationally, but even nationally. And so we've learned maybe the hard way that fostering local partnerships is very important. So who's within the community or the regions that we're working with? How can we leverage their local knowledge? So those are one of the things that we've been learning to push harder. There's several examples that I can give. Even organizations we didn't even think that could potentially be a partner. As an example, we're just started teasing the idea of working with Red Cross in Suriname to implement activities there. So, you know, one partner that we never thought would be involved in sanitation. Rodrigo already went. I think he did a good job describing the difficulties we've had. I can iterate on some. One of the things that we learn is, you know, when these projects are conceived, when the projects are executed, long time sometimes happens. Staff changes in the countries, priorities change. So those things need to be reduced, synthesized in order to execute these activities properly. Of course, COVID was the real priority in many of these countries for a long time. So sometimes it's hard to dig into implementing these activities. The reality is many of the countries that we're working with and the partners are understaffed. So sometimes we need to be very aware of that situation to make sure that we're actually being supportive and collaborating with their activities and not just adding more to their plate. As I mentioned, the travel restrictions, so we learned to find local partners and local consultants that would help execute very quickly to be able to go to the sites. As I mentioned, I'm leading implementations of, 6 countries, out of which I haven't been able to visit one of them. And so I definitely resonate to have a consultant locally that can, you know, share some of the insights on site. So just maybe to wrap up, I would say key steps and how to deal with these projects in you know, in the middle of a pandemic. Make sure the project is feasible, that you've identified local partners, and not only that, but you've also identified their needs and design trainings for them to actually excel in the project. Value local consultants, value local partners to make sure that and of course also the importance of pushing and having, and Rodrigo mentioned this, and I am happy to hear that also for leaner process. We need to move quicker. We need to, you know, oil the system to move forward in an easier and quicker way. So that's my contribution. Thank you very much. Back to you, Julio.
Thank you so much, Joaquin. Indeed, this has made us depend more on the local partnerships, as you mentioned, and the local knowledge. And I think it's a positive aspect that it's made us be a little even more subsidiary, as this is an approach that's always recommended for projects to be successful in developing ownership. Next, I would like to go to Liliana Garcia from Amigos de Ciancan in Mexico. Now you're on the other side, which is the implementation of the project on the ground. So I would like to get your perspective from being a national partner organization on the actual implementation side. Go ahead, Liliana.
Thank you very much, Julio, and thank you for having me. This is a great opportunity to Amigos de Ciancan to share with all of you the case of Amigos de Ciancan, that we work with 8 communities in Quintana Roo. So first, we recognize that we are facing a complex scenario, namely the pandemic. The communities we're working with are already vulnerable population, and they are put in an even more vulnerable situation with the COVID-19 context. So we're dealing with remote communities with limited access to communication systems and therefore information. This makes it difficult for them to make the right decisions. So we have to be more efficient in figuring out what tools and resources are available to us in order to execute our programs as best as possible. To this end, we do that, what I like to call precision shots. And before going in, we are make sure that our actions are relevant. We relied on teams for experts who carry out virtual workshops to evaluate the best possible eco techniques in terms of then being adequate for and appropriable by the target communities. To determine the viability of the eco-technique package that we envision implementing based on the actual needs identified in the social and environmental diagnosis, and of course, during the pandemic, we all learned to ride the wave. This means, first, constant monitoring the national COVID monitoring system, learning about new rules regarding the pandemic and following them, reinforce vigilance in terms of hygiene protocols, an increased sense of responsibility and care for others when we are visiting one of the 8 communities we serve. Now, when we are ready to go in, we have one team of 6 people divided into 2 groups, a technical group and a social group. The technical group take measurements, distances, surfaces, and they study soil types. But most importantly, they continue to ensure that eco-techniques envisioned are appropriate as identified in the virtual expert workshops. The social group carry out surveys to find out if there are any social and environmental challenges with water and use and management, the status of water governance and the local level, and details about the perception about water, hygiene, and health. What about the solutions? What next? We have adopted tech tools to increase our capacity for action. For example, we use a mobile application that allows us to automate the data collection we do in the communities in near real time. It's an Android app called Collab Map. To use this app has resulted in a greater efficiency and planning and carry out our site visits. During the pandemic, the more site visits, the higher risks for our staff and the communities. And technology has helped us decrease the number of visits, which means less risks and more safety for our teams and the communities. There has also been a transfer for us to technology to these rural communities so that they can monitor the water quality themselves. This allows them to better understand the consequences and risks of inadequate interaction with the water. This in turn contributes to reinforcing the community's willingness to improve their relationship with water and therefore strengthen water governance and the community level. All of this resulting in communities organized around making better decisions and collaborating with water management and governance for the well-being of their families and, of course, the ecosystem. So that's our experience in the field. I hope you understand all that I can tell you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Liliana. I think it's very clear how local organizations that support implementation have to focus on efficiency and arming the organization with the necessary tools under the current conditions, improving processes, and while at the same time also dealing with the implementation of protocols at the local level, and as Liliana said, still trying to maintain the local health in the interaction with the community members. Next up, I will go to Ignatius Jean. I would like, Ignatius, maybe your view from the partner side and what has been the experience in implementing a project with so many challenges in the context of a global pandemic. And maybe if you can also draw some positive aspects from this experience. Please go ahead.
Right, thank you, Julio, and for being part of this distinguished panel and for the opportunity for me to represent the rest of our partners in the Caribbean region. Well, this, amidst all the global tumult and turmoil of the pandemic, I think what has happened is it has not only exposed our fragilities and our failures or shortcomings, but it has given us greater clarity in the essential importance of greater cooperation amongst our utilities and other partners in the Caribbean region. I think in implementing this project, one of the things that has happened is, as we are here now, it has given us even greater visibility because of using the platforms, for the virtual platforms for communicating the work that we are doing. And the virtual environment, helps us with greater cooperation and the expertise that we can find, not only within the countries, but albeit we need to be having the physical presence, but once we are able to, we can tap into as many other resource personnel within the region and extra regionally. So it helps to even strengthen what we are doing in towards implementing of the projects. And of course, with our own situation at Kawasa, we would have been in a very difficult situation were it not for the virtual platforms, because travel had become extremely restricted even up to now within our archipelago of islands and in the wider region, so that through the use of the platforms, we at Kawasa, we have had to run several, we had a series of webinars that we ran every week to, get our operators, with new developments in the sector and as the project was ongoing. Another thing that was very important in building, in our training capacity building, was the component of the CReW Plus with the CReW Academy, which again gave us greater outreach to a larger number of persons and other partners in the region. We also have an ongoing activity with our partners who are involved, like the Caribbean Development Bank, the IDB, the Caribbean Water and Wastewater Association, and the UNICEF WASH, where we have, I think, at least twice monthly, an activity that we call the Regional Strategic Action Plan for implementing actions on climate, building climate resilience in the region. But as well, it is in tandem with a lot of what we are doing as far as the implementation of the CReW Plus, which is giving greater awareness and sensitivity to the issues related to IWWM, and as well to build the capacity of our operators. I would say that we never realized how much we could do virtually, and maybe we would have allocated more on the ground activities, especially to address issues of water quality and security that has been so important for treating with the COVID pandemic. And perhaps a lot of the resources that we have used in the past, in maybe a previous CReW in commuting around the region to do that work, we may have had some savings as far as that is concerned, where we have been able to apply a lot of that through the virtual means. And of course, being adaptive, and it has helped us in remaining adaptive, being creative, and responding to needs on the ground. We have had other opportunities as far as other matters that has affected us, natural disasters. For example, the recent volcanic eruption in St. Vincent and the Grenadines brought a lot of the wash issues to the fore. And we were able to again partner, albeit remotely, with agencies of the UN, such as the UNICEF and UNEP, etc., in bringing relief to the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And previous to that, with collaboration with the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, in treating with other emergencies, with natural events, such as even now with the hurricane that have approached both Haiti and the volcano in Haiti, the earthquakes in Haiti. So there's continued, it has helped to strengthen and forge greater partnerships in our region through the virtual platforms. And I think COVID has really caused a lot of that to happen. And I think I would end here in the interest of time and take questions later.
Thank you so much, Ignatius. As you mentioned, then the virtual environment has actually supported improving visibility and developing new collaborations within the region and outside. And also it's a very interesting point that you made, particularly in the Caribbean context, on how it has also had to deal with issues of disaster relief that sometimes come up anyway. In this case, it was a volcano, not a hurricane in the Caribbean, but it shows that even in this situation, then the virtual environment can support carrying out these disaster relief support actions. I would like to open the floor for questions to all our panelists, including Mr. Riquelme. And we have a question here from Raquel Porras, and it's directed to Ignatius and also the other panelists, if you want to chime in. The question is, in rural communities that there are no internet access, how are you maintaining the communication, coordination, and implementation of your projects? So I'm sure this works at different levels, so please, if anybody would like to give us their perspective on this.
I can share some of the experience, Julio, with projects we've been doing in La Mosquitia. So or at least our strategy was, again, to work with a local consultant, someone from the community, someone who would go into the remote community, have a sort of a list of tasks, and then this person has to come out at some point and communicate with us. We have different levels of exchange, what's happened, what's worked, what hasn't worked. We kind of reshape the strategy, and then he or she goes back in, and then we'll touch base again in a couple of weeks and so on. That's as far as innovation goes in these cases.
So one of the things that happened, and I'm using the example of the volcanic eruption to show how you can be, you have to be respond and be adaptive. We had people on the ground from the water utilities in the country, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and we also had some people from the UN system who were on the ground. And in terms of capturing information, so you can analyze what's happening on the ground, they were able to develop an app which would be on the phones, because where you may not have direct internet access, most people would have the mobile facilities were up and running. So that app, they would be able to do the rapid surveys immediately, and you would have a dashboard being filled up immediately to give you perspectives of what was taking place on the ground. So these are some of the things that occur. In the Caribbean spaces, in the context of rural, it is not so, because on small island states, the rural spaces are still pretty accessible as compared to on the continents, where maybe in Guyana, Belize, and other parts of South America. But still the internet connectivity would have been pretty good. And that definitely helps. But yes, it can, if we are people on the ground, and using the technology helps to support the work that we do in the ground in real time and with greater impact.
Thank you, Ignatius. Liliana, can you refer to this experience as a local organization? How you serve sort of as the go-between the overall project and the local community? How has this experience been
Yes, we have the same problem because the 8 communities that we work with, and they are remote, and the technology and all the access to this information is so difficult. So we use an app, and this app can allow so to automate the data in near real time. So when we arrive our offices or our home, we can see all the information that we collect in the communities. So the people to live in these 8 communities, we lend a cell phone, and we can share information with that cell phone that can send us more information. So that's the idea that we implemented in on the ground.
Thank you, Liliana. So you're, I've heard also from Ignatius and yourself, these sort of innovations of how we use different methods. Can any of our panelists refer to any other, let's say, innovations or changes in approach that you've used that you think, this is something that we can keep using because it's more efficient or it opens up different possibilities?
Well, we use another app with the people to the quality of water, because in this pandemic there are less people in Quintana Roo, because Quintana Roo is about tourism. So in this pandemic, the tourism is so down. So we can compare the quality of water. So that's why use another app, and people help us to collect that data, and we can compare. So that was another innovation on the ground.
Thank you, Liliana. Could I refer to everyone's opinion on considering the experience from the past year of implementation? If you would be back at the beginning, what would you do differently? And also, what would your main takeaway be for future project implementation? And I will start with Rodrigo.
That's Julian. Well, I think that we learn a lot, as I was saying at the beginning, about technology and the way it helps to execute a project. So if I start this project again, probably we will start as soon as possible with everything that could be done online, everything that could be done remotely, everything that doesn't need to have a face-to-face interaction. I think we were very pessimistic about the online exercise, but little by little, we could easily separate what can and what cannot be done. We were very timid at the beginning to do some meetings, to do some interactions and exchanges via online, because we thought that the pandemic was going to last 2 months. But now I think that we already know exactly which are the things that will not make the project to lose value if we do it online. So that's the thing I will do differently. The takeaway, I think, is that we learn a lot about communications again, and I will insist on this point. But we have a lot still to learn on the communication. We develop a lot of communication skills. We develop our platforms. We did much more interactive platforms as a bank. We put a lot of videos and interacting courses, and many things could be done online, but that's because we develop the communication skills. It's not just a matter of putting a course online or putting a video. You need to have a whole previous steps with your clients, with your counterparts, about the way that you talk, the way that you interact. So I think that's a lesson learned, and that's a takeaway, and that's something that it's an ongoing work. We always know that engineers are not very good communicating, and we need to learn this even more, but that's a nice first step for us as well.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Ignatius, any additions in terms of the the hindsight and also on the future of implementation?
Well, as indicated by I think it was Rodrigo, that some of the there are things that there are deliverables that you must have face to face, and what it would be is to identify some things that will be necessarily face to face, to identify a lot of the local expertise that we have, who can get onto the ground quickly in the face of some of the challenges we have for moving people around, and of course the communication networks and assets that we have built over the period. One of the good things, though, for me, is even within our framework of operations at Kawasa, is that we have been able to offer a lot of the training online, and the recordings are kept. So you build a very good knowledge base, which in other forms, sometimes when you would have had, say, a consultant on the ground, you may not be doing a video of it or recording. You would have some maybe notes, etc. But now you actually have lectures and a whole series of documentaries that are there for posterity. And we have been able to build that knowledge bank, as it were, using platforms such as YouTube and other social media platforms to make that available to a wider cross-section, not only of our operators, but other communities across the globe, for that matter. And because of our own networkings with other water operating organizations. So I think that is one of the good things, but albeit it always ideally would be the face-to-face interactions.
Thanks, Ignatius. This shows how we've actually had an opportunity to focus more on sharing knowledge and sharing experiences through virtual means, now that we're a bit more forced to do it. Joaquin, any final comments on our experience and looking forward?
Yeah, if I would maybe look back and restart the project, I think I would. And I'm biased from the implementation on the ground activities, right? I would definitely would not underestimate the importance of locking what is it that you're agreeing with the partner as soon as possible, so you can actually start with designs and implementation as soon as possible. Time is tricky. Processes are always existent, and the pandemic just basically stretched that quite a bit. And so you feel later on that time is limited. So that's what I would focus on.
And finally, Liliana, if you want to give us some final words, some final thoughts on how we go forward and what we have learned from this process.
Well, I miss to be closer to people, to have a higher quality interaction. However, this open up an opportunity to people to be closer to technology. So that's a good thing too. I don't know.
So I think we have to analyze after all this is over how what things we keep from our current mode and which ones we rescue from our past action, always looking for more efficiency and better implementation. Now to finish off, I would like to go to Isabel Vanderbeek. She's a task manager for United Nations Environment Program, and she has worked extensively in Latin America and the Caribbean in the conceptualization and implementation and evaluation of projects, and also aligning with GEF strategic funding priorities. Isabel will kindly summarize a little bit of our discussion and hopefully point us to the way forward, again, looking at how we will evolve project implementation in the future. Please go ahead, Isabel.
Thank you, Julio. I am not sure I'm going to be meeting your expectation fully. I will try to the best of my ability to summarize what I've heard or to flag key points and then to provide some reflections of my own. So I heard that through this conversation that the scope of CReW Plus and our project is really spot on in to help us face this pandemic. That the pandemic has forced us to be much more creative in devising solutions to get us to work more closely, with communities, to get us to work on creating knowledge resources for prosperity. As Kawasa mentioned to us, we now have resources and knowledge banks that are available online for all at any time. The crisis has forced us to think outside of the box, to think beyond the traditional face-to-face opportunities, and force us to discover other means, which at the end of the day are much more powerful, and being from the UNEP Environment Program, much less environmental or detrimental. The CReW has been paving the way to creative adaptive management. And the CReW itself was already an innovative project, looking at innovative financing mechanism. And CReW Plus tried to be, again, another innovative project looking at decentralized solution, eco-sanitation, integrated approach to integrated water and wastewater management, supporting the policy agenda, supporting reforms, using technologies. And so overall, I think that the CReW can add one extra item to its list of success stories to transfer, is that it's clearly a project which help us to create this first line of defense against global events such as this pandemic and COVID-19. What else would I say is that ultimately CReW has proved that we don't need complex solutions. Low-cost technologies, nature-based solution, integrated system, a sense of community, of practice reinforced through this virtual means is actually enough to make a difference on the ground, and to ensure longevity and durability of intervention and preparedness to situations such as the COVID-19. So as I said, CReW was a pioneering project. CReW Plus is another pioneering project, may I dare say, and I have no doubt that it will be also a success story. And its body of work is certainly of the highest global significance, especially in face of the pandemic. So I would say to everyone who's listening to us, stay tuned. You've heard a lot of good practices and lessons learned from the project thus far, but I think the project will have much more to offer in the months to come. Connect to the project website. I'm sure the GIZ team can share the link in the chat, can share the link to the CReW Academy, which is a hallmark of the project thus far. But do stay tuned. You will have a lot more to learn from this project. Thank you very much for attending this session. And over to you, Julio.
Thank you so much, Isabel, for this reflection on essentially how and why we do things. I mean, we've been forced into this reflection, but again, this leads to an evolution of our implementation methods and ways of relating, and hopefully it will lead to more effective results and more efficiency, and also at the same time to the development of ownership, hopefully. I would like to thank all our panelists and our colleagues. And again, as Isabel said, we're ongoing into this discussions, and I think there will be more time for reflection on how we go forward and how we carry out future projects under this scope. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we look forward to continuing interaction in this discussion. Have a good afternoon.